So the first one is Yusuke, the art student guy. I kind of like his otherworldly strangeness and his helplessness in some regards. And the other is Futaba, because she kind of reminds me of a 14-year-old me, but without the smarts. And I like the relationship that they have. Also, I think they have the best dungeon stories out of all of them. I mean, with Futaba, it's kind of clear because she is the one that is making the shadow and the dungeon. And because she is a character and not just an evil being, you care about her when you enter the dungeon and you want to know if you can succeed saving her and what happens next. And also, there's the thing where you reveal her childhood and her connection to the bad guys. This is another thing how this whole dungeon thing could have been saved, I think, except for just throwing some protagonists in there that you have to save, which would be too much like Persona 4, I guess. But the other thing is that you could like make a connection between a protagonist, a member of your group, and the bad guy that you are attempting to cure of their evilness. This is kind of the great thing about Yusuke and the dungeon of his master, because they were pretty much connected for his whole life. So he's actually kind of affected by what's going on in this dungeon. They all, at some degree, are affected by the bad guys, but not so much that it can be considered really closely connected. I mean, our protagonist was kind of done dirty by the bank guy, and his life since then kind of sucked because of that. But other than he was the catalyst for it, they aren't really connected in any way. You could swap him with any other asshole and it would have gone the same way. But if you establish a close connection between a protagonist, a member of your group, and a villain, this is a way how they could have made the dungeons and the stories that play out in the dungeons kind of interesting. Still, I don't know why they made those kids such fame whores. Am I too old? And I know that the driving force for this whole getting fame thing is Ryotaro. Very strong contestant for the most annoying video game character ever, but everyone else seems to be fine with that. No one opposes him, so this is kind of a problem of the whole group. And then there's still the murder thing. But before I go to that, some quickfire thoughts that are not that harmful but still are there. So social links are kind of culminating into the same thing. To finish a social link, you always have to beat a shadow of someone who is oppressing that person, which kind of undermines their own individual stories that they should have. They should have distinguishable stories, but if every social link just culminates in the same thing you do in your main story, it all just becomes the same in a way. And what you do to beat them is you go into a dungeon. It's mostly a dungeon to level up and to make side quests. It's like an extra dungeon that auto-generates their tracks and stuff. So the explanation behind it is that this is a dungeon to kind of gather all shadows that are not so severe that they warrant their own dungeon. I can accept that. The problem is when you beat shadows of persons there that are arguably exactly as bad as the ones you fight in the main story, especially if you have to fight the shadow of a hitman in the extra dungeons, where the not so severe cases should be. I think that's it. Okay, let's go on with the martyr stuff finally. So when each villain's heart is healed and freed from evilness, they pretty much become altruistic martyrs instantly. They all want to go to jail for their crimes, and they all are pretty fine with it. And this happens all the time, with each case, no exception. I mean, you can be a good person, doesn't mean you are that self-sacrificing to just throwing your life away and go to jail. What if someone doesn't want to go? What if someone has kind of family to care for? What would they have done in that case? This is kind of the old question of if a criminal loses his memory, or if they get a brain injury and became another person, would you still want him to go to jail to atone for his sins? Or would you be just fine with him being free because he's obviously a good person now? This is kind of the question of, is it important to get revenge or leverage, or is it enough that you can be sure that no one else is going to be hurt by that person again? I mean, that would have been interesting to ask, wouldn't it? A villain is cleared by his evilness and still does not want to go to jail. Would they have insisted? I mean, obviously they don't have anything on him, otherwise they would have just gone to the police. So if he doesn't want to go, what should they do? Would they force him to get punished or leave it be? And while we're speaking of punishment, is everyone really okay just putting the villains in jail? Even the ones whose life kind of sucked because of them, like Yusuke or Futaba, or even our protagonist? You see, in Persona 4, there's a scene where they actually want to murder the murderer. It would have been a kind of indirect kill. They would have put him in a situation where they can be sure that he would be killed, but still. And they are opposing sides and they argue about it quite heavily. It's really intense. That would have been interesting in Persona 5. There might actually have been a character development there. But alas, it always works out for them. Everyone wants to go to jail. They don't ever have to think about a solution. They don't ever have to make moral choices. It's fine. It all just gets wrapped around in a nice little package for you. It's just too convenient to be interesting. And it's too convenient to be believable, for that matter. Even in a story where you can jump into people's hearts. So the question that I always ask myself when I see that is, why was it made that way? Because usually there is a logic behind a decision, no matter how bad we think this decision is. And I think in this case it's quite clear. Before the game came out, like right before, I read an article where someone connected to that game was interviewed. Because it was just so long ago, of course I don't know where to find it. And he said Persona 5 was intended to be a catharsis for the player. So in case you don't know, catharsis is a concept of Greek theater. It says when you are watching someone on the stage going through hardships and you feel those emotions with them, but without going through hardships yourself, you at the end are cleansed because of those emotions. So with that in mind, I think it's fairly safe to say that Persona 5 should be a power fantasy, like Inglourious Bastards, but Persona or something. If you're frustrated with the people up there who screw you, you can just make them change and they just go into jail. There are no moral questions that you have to deal with. Since they are just evils, you don't have to feel bad for them, and you never have to deal with accidentally hurting someone because all is fine. And that's just it. That's the reason for this game. That's the reason why this game is the way it is. And for me, that's disappointing. So, I hope I made it clear that I don't want to shit over your favorite game. Just want to explain why this story could have been better and why it wasn't. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to know if you liked it, if you liked the story, and if yes, then why and what? Because that would be actually interesting to me. So yeah, join me next time. Think when I talk some more about stories. Bye. She's probably going to stay there for the whole time because this is the place where she gets snacks. Oh, okay, bye. Never mind then. In case you need a so the question that I always ask myself when I see that is, why are they making noise up there? Now, not that. I scrapped that. So if the villain, the main villain, is not that deep, bro, I'm funny. Are you done?